All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully some other folks who registered will hop on here before we get too far into the presentation. But I appreciate you both for joining me this morning to talk a little bit about the work that tnAchieves is doing, not only across the state, but very specifically in Loudon County. Today's presentation is really going to be broken down into three parts. We're going to start off by just doing a general overview of what tnAchieves is, who we are, what we do, where we work. I think one thing we've noticed kind of post-pandemic, during the pandemic, is that we haven't always done a great job of telling the tnAchieves story. So we're going to do a little bit of an overview on that now. And then we will get into some local data and talk about student progress, student success, and dig into that for just a minute. And then we'll wrap it up with a call to action and some things that I think you as local community members engaging with tnAchieves can be doing to continue to further our mission and just really open access to the students in your community. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and dig in. My name's Ben Sterling. I serve as the Senior Director of Content here at tnAchieves. I've been on staff since June of 2014, so a little over 7 years on the team, but I also was a student in this program back in 2009. So I've got perspective not only from the staff side, but also a student perspective and volunteer perspective. So seen it from multiple different ways. I'm always excited to talk about tnAchieves. So if you're looking at your screen, you'll see a slide with a map and a little bit of information about tnAchieves. We're a nonprofit that's tasked with administering the Tennessee Promise Scholarship throughout the state of Tennessee. We work currently in most of the state, as you can see on the map. All of the green counties are the communities in which we serve. Since 2009, the class of 2009, we have worked with more than 440,000 students, recruited over 71,000 volunteers. And so, again, we're large now. We haven't always been. We launched back in 2009 with the class of 2009 as tnAchieves, just in Knox County. We expanded in 2012 to 14 counties. One of those was actually Loudon County. So we've been working in Loudon County since 2012. We're in our 9th year there. We'll be moving into our 10th cohort in this community with the class of 2022. So let's talk a little bit about that reach. Where are we now? So if you look at our this table here, we work in 90 counties. And of those 90 counties, 74 of those are considered rural counties. 35 of those counties are deemed at risk or distressed by the Tennessee Department of Community and Economic Development. In those 90 counties, we work with over 600 high schools between public schools, private schools, charter schools, and home schools. So we're serving all of the students across the state of Tennessee, regardless of the type of high school that they attend. When it comes to the colleges that we're working with, we've got 67 different partners. And if you look at the breakdown where Tennessee Promise students are enrolling, probably comes as no surprise that nearly 80% of our students are enrolling at a community college, many of which are telling us that they plan to transfer to a four-year institution once they finish up there. So that's the most popular option. I will say TCATs, if you're unfamiliar with TCATs, the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, always keep my eye on that number. 11%'s actually gone up. When we launched Tennessee Promise back in with the class of 2015, that was 8%. So that number's continued to trickle up, and I would anticipate with the continued emphasis on technical training in Tennessee that number will continue to grow. Let's talk a little bit more about statewide numbers, just kind of a general overview. I mentioned that we are in 90 counties, over 600 high schools, 60,000 students annually. That equates out to 89% of Tennessee's high school seniors are working with tnAchieves at some point. For our staff, I think it's kind of hard to wrap our mind around that a little bit. Nearly 90% of the seniors in the state receive an email from tnAchieves. It's pretty, I think it's pretty cool to think that we work with so many students and families. When you drill that down, and once you get to the point to where students are going to college, 78% of all first-time freshmen at community colleges are tnAchieves students. So a large share of them are our students. And then even more impressively, I think, is that all Tennessee community college graduates, 86% of them are tnAchieves students. So when it comes to those graduation ceremonies, most of those students walking across the stage are our students. So it's really, really cool. Some demographic information. This is not unique to Loudon County. This is a statewide update. Hey, Dr. Barker, how are you? Thanks for joining us. So talking about demographics here, 56% of our students are eligible for federal financial aid. This is determined by the student's FAFSA, so that free application for federal student aid, the parent's income, their estimated family contributions, what determines this. Over half of our students are eligible for that federal assistance. 40% of our students say that they're the first in their families to go to college. If you're familiar with higher ed, this is somewhat of a weird topic because I think a lot of people have a hard time defining or determining first generation. That for a lot of people is different. The way that I see it is if you're the first person in your direct family to go to college and graduate, you're a first generation student. And that means your parents and your siblings, not beyond that. And this is, again, self-reported by students. And I think a lot of times students, they think since their cousin went to college or their aunt or their uncle went to college, that doesn't make them a first generation college student. So I think this number is actually higher. I would be curious to know what it actually is. But we always try to encourage students to be proud of that. Wear that as a badge of honor. I do, for sure. And then this last data point here in terms of demographics, we were working with the National Science Board a couple of weeks ago, and they asked us to determine how many of our students are in a STEM related field. And I think obviously we all understand why that's important with the growing industry across the state, especially in Tennessee. Over half of our students are in a healthcare related or STEM related field, which I think is really, really good. This also includes all TCAT programs. So students that are enrolled at a TCAT and a technical program would be included here in this number. But I think when we look at our role, Tennessee Achieves responsibility. Tennessee promises responsibility for the state. It's not just to get kids to go to college. It's to get students out of college and into a meaningful career. And right now in Tennessee, meaningful career is oftentimes in that manufacturing and in the industry sector. So seeing this number is great, and healthcare too. We had Senator Bo Watson out of Chattanooga at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and he said, if you're in a healthcare field, you could take a dart and throw it at a map and hit a city, and there's a job waiting for you there. He's like, I want you to stay in Tennessee, and we do too, but I think it just says a lot to how many jobs are out there right now, particularly in those healthcare fields. At the bottom of this slide, you'll see just some general costs. Some people tend to be interested in knowing this. The annual cost for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship is $32 million. Comes out to be about $1,000 per award. And then the Tennessee Achieves annual operating budget is $2.5 million. So we're a privately fundraised nonprofit. We do partner with the state and other foundations to provide the funding for our program, but $2.5 million equates out to my salary and a lot of the other staff members' salaries, and any travel costs that we have, and then just programmatic costs as well, facilities, those things. So let's talk about what Tennessee Achieves does. Again, I think one of the things that we haven't always done a great job of is making sure that everyone that hears us speak understands how multifaceted Tennessee Achieves is. It's easy to think that we're just a scholarship program or that we're just a mentoring program, but we're much more than that. So I think this slide does a decent job of explaining that. Again, Tennessee Promise, I think, serves as the backbone of Tennessee Achieves. Without that, we don't have 60,000 students to work with annually. It's the carrot, if you will, that brings students to our program. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Tennessee Promise, that's the scholarship that allows any high school senior in Tennessee to go to community or technical college tuition free. And in order to gain access to that funding, students have to work with us in 90 counties. So what it means to work with us essentially is that they're going to be given access to our variety of supports and programs. One of those that the first thing that they'll really come into contact with us about is our volunteer mentor program. We'll talk a lot about mentoring at the end of this presentation, but essentially every student that applies for Tennessee Promise and completes a FAFSA is paired with a mentor who helps coach them along the way. They're going to complete 8 hours of community service every semester. This is something that we launched with the program back in 2000 with the class of 2009, and it's hung on ever since. One of our founding board members, Randy Boyd, is an Eagle Scout and felt that if a student's going to get an entire semester's worth of tuition, the least they can do is give back an hour of time or a work day's time every semester. So the community service requirement remains, and we at Tennessee Achieves try to give students as many opportunities to complete those hours as we can. And at the bottom of this slide, you'll see our Summer Bridge, Summer Institute, our summer programs, and our complete programs. So our summer programs serve as really a bridging the gap between high school senior year and college freshman year, aimed at students who have really less than a 19 on their ACT. That's an indicator for us that a student's not testing in to college level. and they're not technically ready to start college. So then when they start college, they'll be in learning support classes that first semester. Our bridge program really is aimed to get students beyond those learning support or those remedial courses and get them started on college ready. That's a 3-week program. It's free to the student, and essentially they just receive instruction in reading, English, and math for those 3 weeks, and then they try to test out of their learning support at the end. Summer Institute is like the Summer Bridge program, but I would say it's on steroids. This year was a 6-week program. It's credit bearing. So the students that complete that program start college in the fall with 9 credit hours, and they've eliminated the need for remediation. This year, the only Summer Institute program that we hosted was in Southwest Tennessee Community College in Memphis. We've hosted that now 3 consecutive years. This year, we had 29 students participate and had a 100% success rate. So for 29 students, they started college significantly ahead of where they were in May when they graduated from high school. And then Complete is our coaching model aimed at low-income students. So whenever we have done our analysis on student success, the biggest indicator of whether a student is going to succeed in college is parent income. So for students from a lower income background are significantly less likely to persist in college than their peers that aren't from that background. So we launched Complete aimed at those students, and Complete is essentially a program where we have people on staff. We call them coaches, so Complete coaches, who are assigned to community college service areas, and they have a cohort of 300 to 400 students that they're assigned that meet these criteria, and they coach them through the entire process. So they're paired with them right now as they start college, and they work with them until they graduate, and they communicate with them every month, and they have a goal every month to reach a certain number of students in their cohort. And really the idea is to build this layer of accountability that for some students they just don't have, so that when that student wants to give up, they feel like they're going to be letting that person down maybe if they give up. So keeping them engaged with the process for as long as possible is our goal. And on the side of this slide, you'll see some information about our communication strategy. I would argue that that's what we do the most, is communicate. If you've been engaged with tnAchieves for very long, you probably got an email from us. We send about 16 million emails a year, about 6 million text messages a year. And it's what we do. I would argue that we are about as successful in terms of a communication strategy as any organization in the country. People come to us to learn about how we reach students. We're very targeted in our way of reaching students, and I think that's something that we have really honed. We've honed a craft really over the last 12 years of learning how to get a hold of students and make sure that they meet requirements and stay up to date. We leverage our CRM, our Salesforce platform, to know where is a student in this process. If they haven't filed a FAFSA, if they haven't submitted community service, we know that, and we can target communication to that student or that parent to make sure that they're aware of what's next. So our communication strategy is continually becoming more complex and more sophisticated every year, and I would argue that that makes it better. So let's talk about data. That's why you're all here. So this is really high level data. This is before, in a lot of ways, the student even starts college. So the FAFSA file rate, if you're unfamiliar with the FAFSA, that's the free application for federal student aid. It's a audacious document that students will complete every year, and it's something that we require because as a last dollar scholarship, we need to determine a student's financial aid before we can administer a scholarship to them. So by completing that FAFSA, they're applying for all state and federal aid in Tennessee and nationally. So it's something that we really hone in on in Tennessee. It's something important to us because we see it as sort of the first hurdle that a student has to clear to be on that path to college. Tennessee's led the nation in FAFSA file rate pretty much the entire time that tnAchieves has partnered with the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. But last year, Louisiana surpassed us, which was a dethroning in a way, but they made FAFSA filing a graduation requirement. So when they did that, shot them past us. So here we are now looking to try to replace them on the throne of FAFSA leaders. I would argue that we're still a leader in that space. We're just second right now. So our statewide average was 86% in Loudon County. We surpassed the state average and made it to 87% in a pandemic year. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think you should find your school counselor, pat them on the back because they went above and beyond this year to get those FAFSAs filed. Not an easy task. I participated in a lot of Zoom sessions this past spring to help students file FAFSA. It's not easy to do on the Zoom. So these counselors, I think, pulled their weight. There's no doubt. And then community service, again, we talked about this, but here's the numbers. Our students have completed over 3 million hours of community service across the state In Loudon County, over 25,000 hours of community service have been submitted to tnAchieves. Many of these hours completed right there in Loudon County locally. So I think if you're part of a community organization or you know someone that is and they need volunteers, feel free to advertise that to Tennessee Promise students. They need something to do, and oftentimes they're really good volunteers. So just let us know if you need us to get the word out. Let's talk success, student progress. So this is benchmarking Loudon County against the state as far as how many students apply to Tennessee Promise, how many have enrolled, and then their success. So back with the class of 2021, we had 480 Tennessee Promise applicants. And then the two middle rows, the enrolled number and the first year retention, this is from the class of 2019. 186 students enrolled, 67% of those returned after their first year. That's right at the state average. So pat on the back there. I think if you're meeting state average here, this is really good. And then 3-year graduation rate. This is from the class of 2017, 1 percentage point above the state average. Right there again, I think there's nothing to hang your head about there at all. State average is really good, especially considering the size of Loudon County and the number of students graduating there. It's a significant number. So really good to see that they're right there on par. Let's zoom out just a little bit and talk tnAchieves success as a whole from the statewide perspective. You'll hear us talk about fall to fall retention routinely because we see that as the first metric that we can track, number one, but it's also really important because if we can get a student through that first year of college, they're oftentimes way more likely to come back and graduate. So if we can keep that number high, our likelihood of increasing the graduation rate is also there. So when you look at tnAchieves students versus their non-Tennessee Promise peers, they're outpacing them by 14 percentage points. And then our students at any college across the state, 74% fall to fall retention. Surely proud of that. Below that, you'll see our 6-year graduation rate. So our students are outpacing their peers there by 16 percentage points. Again, I think this speaks to the value of supports and why supports are important in a student's success in college. If you look on the right-hand side of this screen, you'll see our programs and the way that those are impacting first-year retention. First one of those is our summer programs, like we mentioned, the Bridge program and the Institute. Students that participate in those programs are 34% more likely to retain from fall to fall than their non-summer program peers. For complete students, those that are being coached, 23% more likely to retain. And then Knox Promise, which we haven't mentioned, those students that participate in that program are 42% more likely to retain from fall to fall than their peers. So Knox Promise is essentially complete, that coaching model, but it's tied with completion grants, which are essentially, if you've heard the word emergency funding out there, but essentially it's the idea that a student that participates in our program, if they run into some sort of a roadblock financially that keeps them from succeeding in college, we have dollars to help address those problems and alleviate that for that student. We were excited this week to announce that we've rolled out complete grants across the state. So we were able to partner with the legislature, the General Assembly, and we have some funding that's now available to every student in Tennessee. So basically taking this Knox Promise model and expanding it throughout the state. So your students in your community got an email about that this week, and we've actually got some requests rolling in. We often hear we're often asked, what does that funding typically go towards? What are the complete grants typically used for? For the most part, they're used for gas, groceries, and textbooks and supplies. So those tend to be our most requested funding sources. We partner with local grocery stores, gas stations to provide gift cards for those things. And then in terms of textbooks, we partner with the colleges to administer those funds. We've also paid for things like childcare, auto repairs, housing. It just depends. Whatever the student has requested for, we evaluate those on a case-by-case basis and administer funds when and if it's necessary. So we've got a lot of really good news in terms of the success, but if you look across the state, the pandemic really did impact the college going rate in Tennessee. For us, this is a big deal because we were awfully proud of the fact that with the class of 2015, we increased the state's college going rate by 4.6%. And we maintained that pretty well over the course of the last couple of years. And then with the pandemic, we lost all that ground and fell down to 56.9%. I think most institutions felt this. There was a decline in enrollment throughout the state of Tennessee. But for some reason, look at Loudon County, went up in their college going rate. One of about 6 counties in the state this year that actually increased their college going rate during a pandemic. I think that just speaks again. school counselors going above and beyond to make sure that students are aware of the next steps after high school, and then local post-secondary institutions carrying that torch just on through. Another county that saw an increase in the college going rate this year was Knox County. So you look at Loudon and Knox, oftentimes aligned, working with Pellissippi, oftentimes very closely. So I think there's just a lot to be said about continuing to have these conversations with students and not allowing them to die off during the pandemic. And I just applaud Loudon County immensely for increasing that college going rate. Again, go shake your pat them on the back, whatever is the safe thing to do right now. Go say something nice to a school counselor because I think they did a great job in 2021 when things were hard, were really, really hard. So let's talk about ways to engage with Tennessee Achieves. While things are looking up in Loudon County, they're not always looking up in all the counties around you, and they're not always going to be great. So what can we do to continue to carry the torch for Tennessee Achieves? I think the easiest way to do that is to be a mentor with our program. It directly aligns you with the work that we're doing. It's a way to volunteer in your community without committing a whole lot of your time. 12 hours per year, I think, is maybe even exaggerated. For a lot of mentors, it's less than that. It's really just an opportunity for you to be paired with a group of seniors from the high school of your choice and help coach them through the college process. So if you're passionate because you graduated from Loudon County or Lenoir City or Greenback, wherever it is, we can pair you with students from that high school and you can help coach them through that process. If you mentored with us back in 2020 or in 2019, our program was in person. So you were able to meet with your students in person. Traditionally, that's how we've done it. Obviously, last year we had to adjust and we created and launched what is called Tennessee Achieves Connect, which is an online mentoring platform that we're really proud of. And it allowed our mentor program to move entirely online and allowed mentors to continue to help students and find their way through this process virtually. In 2022, after surveying mentors, we're realizing that not every mentor loved the virtual mentoring. Some adored it, and that's how they want to mentor forever. But for some, they want to find a way to get back in person with their students. So we are going to do sort of a hybrid model in 2022. We're going to continue to use Tennessee Achieves Connect. That's not going to go anywhere, but we're going to provide mentors and students opportunities to meet in person. So we're going to call these Tennessee Achieves open houses. We're going to partner with local post-secondary institutions to open up a conference room, if you will. Tennessee Achieves staff will be there for a couple hours, and it allows mentors and students to convene on their own time, or it'll be on that day in that time frame, but they can connect with each other on a college campus and allow them to not only see a college campus, but get to meet each other too in person. There's also the opportunity to meet independently with your students. If you're a mentor and that date that we pick for the open house in your community doesn't work, that's okay. You can just meet at a Starbucks or something down the street there locally in your community and meet with them in a public space. That's certainly fine as well. So in terms of mentors needed in Loudon County, 73 total. We've never not met our goal in Loudon County. The community always comes out and supports our program. We're always thankful for that. We're usually well above this in terms of the number of mentors recruited in the community. But if you are going to share this in your community or share it with your friends in your networks, we would love for you to do that. The deadline to apply is December 3rd. We still have plenty of time to get to that point, but the deadline, again, December 3rd, you apply at tnAchieves.org/mentors. Very, very easy to share. And then here, let's just talk about some action items in terms of ways that you can engage with Tennessee Achieves in the coming months. Obviously, we've just talked about one of those, becoming a mentor or sharing the mentor opportunity with your friends and family and coworkers. Easiest thing to do, it puts you in direct contact with Tennessee Achieves. You're as much of a stakeholder in this work in that place as I am, as somebody that draws a paycheck from Tennessee Achieves. In the middle of your screen, you'll see Connect Tennessee Achieves with your community. What we mean by this is if you are a member of a Rotary Club, if you're a member of a church group that has an opportunity for a speaker, if you're a member of a community group, if you're the superintendent of schools and you want us to come to a convocation or something along those lines, you have a way for us to come speak about Tennessee Achieves and share our message, we're there. Just count us there. We need 5 minutes. We can fill an hour. It doesn't matter how much time you've got. Our team will be there to speak and provide some information about mentoring and the things that we're doing in the community, because I think the more ears that hear it, the better. So if you're a part of your community, and that can be virtual or in person, we can be there and provide that information. And the last thing I think you can do, and this is just super important, is to tell somebody about Tennessee Promise. And when I say that really for anyone, but specifically those with a high school senior. And obviously the school counselors have done an excellent job in Loudon County. But I always like to say my brother missed the tnAchieves application. And I was a student in this program. I was an ambassador for this program. I was a volunteer for this program, and I worked for this program. And my brother did not complete his tnAchieves application. So it can happen to anybody. They can miss that deadline if they just aren't reminded of it. So if you know a high school senior and they haven't submitted their Tennessee Promise application, just remind them to do it. Get that in. The deadline's November 1st. They got some time, but as we all know, really once football season starts, it's Christmas, and it just blows right by. And so get that application in now. It takes literally 5 minutes to complete the Tennessee Promise application, and that gets that ball rolling in terms of eligibility. So that's all that I have in terms of a program. I'm gonna stop there. So if you have any questions, concerns, anything you'd like to say, just unmute yourself. The floor is open. I can answer any questions that you have. So just fire away. Let's see here. Andrew, I saw you were taking some notes. Are you a mentor with the program? It looks like you're muted. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. My biggest concern this year has been trying to get the tnAchieves Connect platform to work. It's mostly because of my less than average computer skills, but it is a challenge, and I worry going forward whether I'll be able to do the job as well as I could without getting better at working with this platform.
Yeah, I certainly hear that. We're going to continue to make it easier to use. Number one, I think it was new to us too, and so I think we're getting better at teaching people to use it, providing tutorials and those things. But also, we had a mentor program for 10 years. Before that was successful, and we didn't have Connect. So I think you can still be a successful mentor without it. If you don't feel comfortable using it, that's okay. You can still utilize the old school way of using a phone to call somebody and mentor that way. So feel free, whatever works best for you. But we see Connect as just an excellent tool to help along the way, but it's not necessarily the only way to mentor. Dr. Barker, I see your comment here. Once we're done this week, so we're hosting 90 of these this week. We've got about 7 going on right now across the state. Every county's getting one. So once we have them all done, we'll process all these recordings. Well, I don't know how we're going to share them just yet, but I can certainly just get you a YouTube link. We'll have them on YouTube, but then we'll share them out in different formats and ways, and you can also share the PowerPoint presentation too if you need that.
My name is Susan Hogan. I'm on the phone with my husband Mike. We're in the car, so I apologize if it's a little loud. But one of the issues that came up with my students is she was looking for an esthetician program, and apparently the TCAT doesn't offer that. So does the Tennessee Promise look to expand the number of institutions in the program, or how do schools get added?
A good question. In regards to that specific program, it is offered at some TCATs. I wouldn't say that we're expanding the college partnerships beyond where we are now in terms of like the public institutions, because we're already in all the community colleges and all the TCATs. And then there are some esthetician schools that are private entities throughout the state. But at this point, I don't think we're going to be partnering with them. But what I will say is that if the student is interested in a TCAT and that TCAT doesn't have that program, there's other TCATs in the community that may be close enough that they could commute to, but they could also bring that up to their admissions team at the TCAT, because most of these TCATs are equipped to host those types of programs, just maybe not at the local campus. So certainly have that conversation with the college and see what that looks like. But we're also happy to have conversations with students who, if they want to go to an out of network institution that doesn't fall under the Tennessee Promise umbrella, we're happy to have those conversations with them about identifying other forms of financial aid to offset that cost. Because we want them to do the program that they want to do, and even if it doesn't fall under our umbrella. You're welcome. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for hopping on. I can take a few more questions, but this is all that I have in terms of presentation. If you don't have any other questions, you can feel free to go ahead and hop off here. I appreciate you for engaging with our work and look forward to seeing you down the road sometime.